Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pike County Report. I'm your host, Shannon Deskins, along with Pike County Judge Executive Ray Jones. And a lot of people are talking about something that's happening right now in the county that has not happened in several years, and that is we're kind of waiting to pass a budget. It's ready.
We're waiting on the state, and
That's right.
Historically, the fiscal court has waited till the last minute to pass a budget. And our last court meeting was on June 4th. It was the evening court meeting. And we were ready to pass the budget at that time. We'd already given it one reading. It had been advertised, and but when the first step is we give it a reading, it goes to the Department of Local Government. They review the budget to make sure your numbers are accurate, to make sure that all your line items on your expenditure side and your revenue side balance, and then they will approve the budget. So we are simply waiting on the Department of Local Government to finish their review. And we were told, Frankie Stacy, the county treasurer, told me today that we're expecting it in the mail at any time. So the next court meeting will be on June 18th at 10 a.m. And the public's welcome to come. It's open to the public. And it will also be broadcast on Pike TV, live streamed on Facebook, and then you'll be able to find it on YouTube, Pike TV's YouTube channel. But we should have the budget in place on June 18th, which will be somewhat of a new phenomena for the county in that it's not done at the last minute.
And tell us some of the things that may be in the budget that people may not understand, or is there anything different in the budget, or is it just the fact that everything's put together a little earlier than usual?
Well, we went through and we were very conservative with our revenue estimates. In the past, one of the problems where the county had got in trouble was that there were revenue estimates that were overly optimistic. And we wanted to make sure that we went back 5 years, and everything that the county had brought in, every line item in the budget for revenue. There's two sides to the budget. There's the revenue side and the expenditure side. The revenue side is, what will the county take in taxes and fees, solid waste charges, those kind of things. It also is a little bit skewed, though, because it has money that we receive for grants, state road aid money, reimbursements from FEMA for flood damage, storm damage, those types of things. That's all contained in your budget. So what you really have to do is you have to dissect down, take those monies out, and then you get down to what the county actually has control over spending. Even though the FEMA money, your waste hire grant, your recycling grant, all those things are in there, but they're earmarked for a specific purpose. Your county road aid money that comes from the state has to be spent on roads.
Right.
So when you cut through that, if you really look at what the county budget is, it has shrunk considerably over the last 10 or 15 years, due predominantly to the loss of coal severance tax money. So on the revenue side, there were no reductions to fire departments or senior citizen centers. We did cut spending in a lot of different areas. Personnel, one of the things that we did is we eliminated part-time seasonal workers, those types of things. And we're trying to work with Brian Morris, our jailer. Brian's done a terrific job. The revenue for the jail last month was at an all-time high. So the more revenue that we can take in for state and federal inmates that are housed here, the less money that the county's taxpayers have to put in to operate the jail.
Right.
So this year it's right at $1 million or a little under $1 million, which is down substantially. It's a really good benefit for the taxpayer. And what that does, Shannon, is it frees money up for other capital improvements. We did not budget any money in this budget for equipment for the landfill or the solid waste program or the road department. And what we hope is at the end of the current fiscal year, it looks like that we're going to have a pretty substantial surplus. When this administration came in, there was only $100,000 in the bank, in the general account, in the consolidated account. There was about $270,000 in the solid waste account. Well, that sounds like a lot of money until you think that the county's payrolls and benefits are over $1 million a month just for the employees. And that counts your jail employees, it's your road department, solid waste, public works, your administrative employees in the courthouse, your custodial staff in the Hall of Justice, the Judicial Center, and the county courthouse. So it's over 200 employees. It's a big operation. So we are trying to be as frugal as we can. The goal is that the more money we have in the bank at the end of this fiscal year and the more stable our finances are, the better our chance of getting the credit rating back that was taken in June of 2018.
And that was actually the next point I was going to make, is a lot of this is you've got to be very careful because of that credit rating. But you think you've turned the corner now and we're heading in a better direction?
I think with the work that Mr. Frankie Stacy, the county's treasurer, has done to get us in compliance, we've met with the auditors several times. I think a lot of the problems that had plagued the county that caused us to lose the credit rating have been fixed. Mm-hmm. We are looking at every penny we spend, and we are making sure that we're following the auditor's recommendations. And if you go back to the reason that the county lost its credit rating, financial transactions, transfers of money that hadn't been recorded, the county's accounts hadn't been reconciled. The other issue was the county didn't have a capital plan, and that's something I've talked about in the fiscal court meetings. Something that not only affects the fiscal court, but it also will impact Mountain Water, potentially the library board, and we can talk about that as well. But what we're trying to do is to address those issues that S&P raised in its press release when it first reduced the county's bond rating, and then 3 weeks later took the county's credit rating.
Okay, and that's something that I'm sure we'll talk about as it goes farther and things start coming back to the county. I'm sure those are things you'll want to get out to the public. Something else go ahead.
I think it's important that for people to understand the significance of the county losing its credit rating. Mm-hmm. Most of us, if we've bought a house, a car, if you have to put new appliances in, a lot of people, we go to a local business and, do it on credit because those are expensive items, and most people simply don't have the money just to pay cash for them.
Right.
Or if they do have, they don't want to take it out of their savings. They want to be able to make those payments over time. When the county lost its credit rating, the county's no different. It operates just the same as any other household budget. Of course, it's more money, but it's also more expenditure. It's a bigger operation. And when the county has to pay as it goes for things like expanding the landfill or buying new equipment for the road lots or solid waste, it takes your cash flow. I mean, you're taking cash out of the bank, and if there's a hiccup, something happens where your tax collections are down, your coal or mineral severance comes in below the estimates, your occupational or net profit tax comes in below the estimates. Same thing with property tax. If you have a shortfall, then all of a sudden now you're in a cash flow problem. Mm-hmm. And in the past, Shannon, if you remember, the county had to go to Community Trust Bank and borrow money on a line of credit.
Right.
We're going to do everything we can to avoid the county having to go borrow money. When you go into the next fiscal year, the first quarter is usually the leanest quarter of the fiscal year because you don't have the property tax coming in, you don't have your solid waste coming in like you normally do. Mm-hmm. Really, the only tax you're going to get in that first quarter will be net profits, occupational tax, and coal and mineral severance for that quarter. So the county can end up in the first quarter or second quarter of the fiscal year. And keep in mind that the fiscal year, when we talk fiscal year, we're talking July 1 to June 30th the following year. So we are in the 2019 fiscal year right now. That fiscal year ends June 30th. The next fiscal year, which will be the 2020 fiscal year, will start July 1. Mm-hmm. So we've got to be careful that we don't end up in a cash flow issue in the first quarter.
Right.
That's what's happened to the county in the past, and we're trying to avoid that. But if we can restore the credit rating, we can spread out the capital investments that we're going to have to make for equipment, vehicles. I mean, we got to look at things like, okay, we've got a lot of fire departments, senior citizen centers, community buildings. We have to look, okay, when will a heat pump have to be replaced at Mouth Guard? When will we have to put a new roof on the fire station at Shelby Valley? We just had to put a roof on the fire station at Big Creek. So those are the kind of things that we have to look at, and it's never been planned like that before.
And that's what you and I were talking about right before we went on the air. Here is this capital plan, and that's, it's kind of being what we said, being proactive instead of being reactive, because right now we really can't afford to be reactive.
And one of the reasons that S&P took the county's credit rating was the failure to have a capital plan. Mm-hmm. And I use my office as an example. I'm a small business owner. If I need 10 computers for my law firm, it's better for me to go buy 2 computers this year, 2 the next year, 2 the following year. So that way, when they're all worn out about the same time, I'm not having to go buy 10 new computers. Right. It's easier to plan and budget for 2 or 3 computers a year as opposed to 10. The same thing's true with the county. We have to look every year, what vehicles or equipment do we need to replace on road lot 1? What do we have to do on road lot 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6? What new equipment do we need at the landfill? What are we going to have to spend at the landfill this year on expansion or on, permitting, those types of things? We have to look at all of our buildings. I mean, we have a massive number of facilities in the county. Again, parks that have to be taken care of, community centers, senior citizen centers, fire departments. And we need to look at each one of those buildings and say, okay, what do we need this year? And we have to figure out what that's going to cost. And every year we're going to have to budget that. Now, our plan is we're working on a capital plan, and it is a massive undertaking. When you look at the amount of infrastructure that the Pike County Fiscal Court controls, spread out over nearly 800 square miles, it's a massive territory with a lot of equipment, a lot of vehicles, a lot of properties. We're going through and putting the capital plan together. Most of that information has been given to the county treasurer. We've had all the solid waste foremen, the road foreman, the public works commissioner or supervisor, putting this together. And once we get this in place, we probably will go back and do a budget amendment that says, okay, this is what our plan needs to be for this year. And then next year, this is what we're going to have to spend on. And we're going to try to do that 3 or 4, maybe 5 years out. Just like we looked at the prior revenue and prior expenditures, we went back 5 years, looked at all the revenue sources, and we went back 5 years and looked at every line item in the budget for expenditures.
Wow.
Well, that's how we put a budget together.
That's a big undertaking, yeah.
The budget the county's operating under right now was done in about 2 days. They took the last year's budget. In fact, they hadn't even completely cut out the fact that the elimination of 3 of the magistrates. So it was done, at the last moment because the state was getting ready to take over the county. We went back and we did this like a business would do a business plan. We took 5 years of revenue, 5 years of expenditures, looked at where we could cut, and came up with the most optimistic or the most conservative estimates on revenue and expenditure we could, rather than just the most overly optimistic approach which had been taken in the past.
And that's kind of like preparing for the worst, and then that way, in case anything better happens, hey, we're just in a great place, rather than expecting the best and then not being prepared for anything.
The worst thing a government entity can do is overestimate their revenue, because if you overestimate your revenue, you're going to budget money that you may not have.
And that's happened, I think we've talked about in the past with coal severance money. Not calculating, because a lot of people, I think we've talked about before, don't understand how it works. And of course, we're nowhere near where we used to be. And it continues to fall.
Well, basically, the coal severance tax is a state tax. It's controlled by the state, just like your motor vehicle usage tax, just like your state income tax, just like when you go to the store and you pay the 6% Kentucky sales tax. Coal severance is a state tax, but there's a mechanism to return a portion of that money back to the local governments. And historically, the way it worked, and back when Brett Jones was governor, they passed, I think it was House Bill 48, that the goal of which was to return 50% of the severance tax to the coal counties. And a lot of legislators, myself included, at the time filed bills to try to get it all back. But as recent as 2012, 2013, the coal severance tax generated about $330 million for the general fund, for the state. And half of that went to the general fund. It was such a huge amount of money, it would have been such a huge hit to the state general fund. There was no way at that time that you could get the political support from the central Kentucky legislators and the non-coal producing areas to pass
To give that
bill.
up.
No. So, but basically what happens, half of it went to the general fund, half of it went to the coal counties. And the half that went to the coal counties, 15% of the total was LGEAF, Local Government Economic Assistance Funds, went directly to the county, and it was earmarked. There was certain parameters on how it could be spent. Like 30% of that money had to be spent on county roads. 35% of the total went to the Local Government Economic Development Fund. And if you look at the way it was calculated, before it got down to that level, there were some things taken off, like scholarships for the osteopathic medical students, Read to Achieve, Unite, things like that that were intended to address problems in eastern Kentucky, particularly the drug epidemic. Some of that money was used to service the debt for water and sewer projects that have been done in the coal counties by bond issues. But when you get right down to it, on the local government economic development side, 1/3 of what was left went into the multi-county fund and 2/3 to the single county fund. And the single county fund can only be spent in the county where the coal is produced.
Right.
And essentially, it was supposed to be used for economic development. And it got to the point where that wasn't the case. And then former Representative Leslie Combs and myself took the stance when we saw what was taking place. And we warned the local governments, the coal severance tax is declining. We have to start now focusing on what our priorities should be, and that has to be economic development. And as you know, the fiscal court at the time sued the legislature. Of course, that was dismissed as a frivolous lawsuit. And Leslie and I both, I think we could say we were vindicated by that.
I think a lot of that's just not understanding how that works, because I guess when you break it down, it can be a little complicated. But,
Yeah,
but you guys have a grip on that now going forward, especially in your budget.
And because of the declining severance tax, now it's been basically changed. I think in the last budget, it was only $20 million that went in for all the coal counties.
Yeah.
So you can imagine what type of impact that had. The money that was used to subsidize, a lot of people complaining over the solid waste bills. The garbage bill was $10 a month for years. And it was because the county was able to use coal severance tax to subsidize that. Coal severance is gone.
Yeah, those days are gone. Something I know we talked about, kind of switching gears a little bit and getting away from the big picture of the budget and into more specific things in the county, is we talked before about this large slide that was located on Little Robinson Creek. And at the time, it was before we talked, it was over 800 loads had been taken out. And I'm sure we're above that now. Can we get an update on what?
It's over 900 loads of material. Fortunately, it has stabilized some. Yesterday, I spoke with a gentleman by the name of Bob Jones, who's an engineer with the Division of Abandoned Mine Lands. I also had a message from Bob Scott, who's the director of the state AML office. The state is going to contract this out. I think there's a meeting on June 20th with prospective contractors to come in, look at the slide. There will be a bid letting. So the state's going to take over this problem. The problem is the county, as you know, we lost Danny Taylor in a tragic accident. Danny was a longtime county employee, deputy sheriff. And it's been a tragedy for the county, and we want to extend our sympathies to the Taylor family. They're great people. And, but it shows just how dangerous the work that our road department does. And not just the road department, but solid waste as well. I mean, when you're out on the back of a garbage truck and it's cold, it's wet, we know there's a lot of people on the roads with drug problems, drug drivers, drunk drivers. The people who work for the county, they put their lives on the line. And the work that our road department does can be extremely dangerous. And we want to remind people that our road workers are overworked, the road department's understaffed. We've got to get new equipment for them to work with, and we're in the process of trying to implement a safety program that should have been in place 20 or 25 years ago. But we've already hauled this one slide over 900 loads of material from the slide, and we had to do it to keep the road open. There's 11 or 12 homes up the creek above the slide, and it's a matter of those people being able to get to work, getting their kids to school, or if there's an emergency, you couldn't even get emergency first responders to them. So we have a duty to keep the road open, and the county worked tirelessly. Fabian Little, Noah Case Jr., Gary France, two road foremen from Lot 3 and Lot 2. The employees on those lots worked tirelessly to keep the road open. AML is going to take over the problem, but the county's already spent over $100,000 in manpower, in equipment, fuel. I mean, you can imagine 900 Mack truckloads of debris that has been removed from that site. We are hopeful that we can get reimbursed a portion of that money from the state and from FEMA, because the problem started back in February when we had all the rain and we had the disaster declaration that I declared, and Governor Bevin and President Trump followed suit.
And that's one of those things, that's a perfect example of what we were talking about with the budget. Those things that you have to account could possibly happen, especially when we're talking about the bond rating. Those are things that you're going to take a hit on because you couldn't see it coming.
Well, I mean, if you look at the damage that we had during all the rain in the winter, it was a fairly mild winter from the standpoint of snow and ice. We were able to save some money on because we didn't have to use a lot of salt. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side of it, we ended up spending massively on slides, slips, down trees, and that's still a problem. Even on Sunday, I had a gentleman call me over on Mud Lick that said, we've got a massive tree down in the road. So the road crew, now thinking about this on Sunday afternoon, the road crew has to go out, and I don't think a lot of people realize how hard our road crews work. A lot of people are complaining about the weeds not being cut. Well, we came in office, we've got 4 working mowers. I think I talked about this on the radio show.
Yeah, you did.
There's somewhere around 1,200 miles of county roads. Well, when you cut them, you got to cut both sides of the road. So you're talking 2,400 miles of weeds to cut. And you've got 4 mowers and 5 or 6 guys. I think we just hired a new mower man. Mm-hmm. You got 6 people to run 4 mowers over 2,400 miles. So put it in perspective, it's 220 miles or so to Louisville. Each one of those mowers is going to have to cut, be like cutting the weeds, to Louisville and back and then back again. I mean, just to put it in perspective, we don't have the manpower and we don't have the equipment, and they're doing the best they can, and we just ask people to be patient and understanding. We didn't create the situation. This fiscal court is working to address those kind of problems, but we inherited the situation. We inherited the equipment that the road department had, that solid waste had, and we're trying to address those needs, and it's going to take some time. But we can't address them, Shannon, until we get our credit rating back, because you're not going to have the bonding capacity to get the equipment.
Now, a couple other things in the last few minutes that we have left. I know you've got some different things to talk about. We were talking about all the damage in the winter, but we've got some good news for summer, and that being the Hardy Pool. Is a pool that has not had water in it for a long time.
Well, the county shut it down about 3 or 4 years ago because they didn't have the money to operate it. We had a gentleman, Kevin Tilley, who lives over at Hardy, came to us and proposed leasing it, and the court looked at it, and we had a lease drafted by the county attorney's office, and essentially the county allowed him to operate the pool. He has to comply with all the regulations under Kentucky administrative regulations regarding public pools, has to have lifeguards in place. And the benefit is that if the county can't afford to open it, and we can allow it to be used for members of the public, and he's undertaking the fact that he's got to insure it, he's got to staff it, and operate it, we feel it's a benefit to the community. And we're looking for someone. We've had a couple individuals talk to us about the Phelps pool. I'm hopeful that we can do something on that, at least for the part of the summer. There's a lot of kids in the Phelps area that it would benefit. And it's something, I grew up in Virgie, we had a community pool. Of course, that pool's been sold, and it was a great thing. It was a lot of kids every day were there. And, it's physical activity. It's something that, a parent could drop their child off, know that they're going to be safe, and hopefully we can get the Phelps pool done as well.
And that's something that we're losing and we have lost, are those community pools. The city of Pikeville recently lost theirs. I know the YMCA is going to get one back, but it's good to see some of these community pools out in the county maybe getting some new life.
Well, our commissioners, Ronnie Robertson, Jason Tackett, and Brian Booth have worked closely with me to try to help straighten out the finances, but they've really taken it on themselves to help improve the quality of life in the county. Everything from trying to get the pools open back up, cruise-ins, horse trail rides, things like that have really no cost to the taxpayers. All of us chipped in together to help with the horse ride up at Lick Creek 2 weeks ago. So, those are the kind of things that you do to help rebuild your communities.
Well, and talking about the horse trails, even looking at an ATV trail system. But that all goes back to what you've said since day one is the solid waste, the garbage problem of the littering and stuff, which you guys are addressing aggressively, because you've said yourself, people are going to come in for these tourism events, and if it's nasty, they're not going to want to come back. So you're addressing all of it.
Well, the thing that amazes me is how, as the old saying goes, how sorry somebody has to be. Even if you've not paid your garbage bill, if you'll put it out beside the road, they'll pick it up, because we would rather have it picked up, taken to the landfill, and disposed of properly than having somebody throw it in our creeks, dumping it beside the road. Because I grew up at Virgie. Every day of my life, pretty much, I drove across Penny Road with somebody. One of the fire chief up at Shelby Valley sent a photograph to me this week. A whole massive amount of garbage dumped right beside the road on Penny Road. And Bruce Anderson, our officer, was up there yesterday and sent me the names of some individuals he found in the garbage, and they're going to be charged. And I'm hopeful that we can talk to our county attorney and have him convey to the judges that the only way this is going to stop is if people are incarcerated. I'm almost to the point that it's not enough just to have them clean it up and pay a fine. I think it would send a strong message that if you do this, this is where we live. This is where we're raising our families. People that come into Pike County, Kentucky, one of the reasons that we've changed the way the fiscal court operates, we've tried to make it run professionally, is I've had so many people come up to me and say, well, it was a comedy show before. And I'm not pointing fingers, but we are trying to run our county government in the most professional way possible. Why? Because that is a representation of it sets the tone for how people view Pike County.
Right.
The same thing's true with the garbage problem. When people drive across Penny Road, or they drive up through Hardy, or they're driving up to look at the Hatfield-McCoy feud site. Mm-hmm. When you go wherever it is in this county, and you see garbage throughout the ditch lines filled with bottles, food wrappers, there's no excuse for that. And what that does is it sets I had a friend of mine yesterday, was up in Wisconsin, had to take his wife to Mayo Clinic, and he said, I've not seen the first piece of garbage beside a road in Wisconsin. Well, Wisconsin's got a pretty strong economy. Mm-hmm. Why would people here care so little about their community, about their friends and neighbors and the future of our region, that they would just throw garbage out? And, it may not be popular. And in reality, if it makes somebody mad because we're taking a hardline stance on garbage, then so be it. But if you're caught illegally dumping, this fiscal court is going to do everything in its power to make sure that they're prosecuted.
And that is happening, and that's something we can touch on later.
Over 80 people have been charged, and most of whom have pled guilty. They're required to pay a fine, court costs, and clean it up.
And that will continue. That
will continue as long as I'm county judge.
Now, we've just about run out of time, so I wanted to give you the opportunity. Is there anything else you want to address?
I'll close it with this. If there's an issue with county government, mm-hmm. when you service over 20,000 people in the solid waste system, there will be issues where people miss their garbage pickup. The drivers and loaders are human too. If there's a problem with a missed pickup, call the office, 432-6245. If there's an issue with the road, call the road department, 432-6230. A lot of people just want to go on Facebook and gripe and complain. We can't address problems or fix problems if we aren't aware of it. Again, there's going to be issues with the solid waste system. There will be people who will come out and put their garbage out after the garbage trucks already ran and say, they didn't get my garbage. Well, the garbage didn't make it out in time. There are issues like that happens. There are issues where the truck drivers miss, you get a different driver and loader. May not be familiar with that particular route, and that happens from time to time. Somebody's off sick, something along those lines. The driver calls in sick. You have a fill-in driver. They may not be aware that there's a couple houses off of a
But you
side
can't
road.
fix it if you don't know about it.
But if you call the office and there's a legitimate problem, it will be addressed immediately.
Okay. Well, thank you, and we're out of time again. It seems like we blink our eyes and the time is gone, but we'll meet again and do the Pike County report again soon.
And the next court meeting is Tuesday, June 18th at 10 a.m.
And hopefully we'll say Pike County has passed a budget.
We will pass a budget on the 18th.
All right, thank you. And thank you for joining us for another episode of the Pike County Report. I'm Shannon Deskins.